You're about to discover some of the unsung heroes who shaped the sound of Australian rock history. Beyond the global giants like AC/DC and INXS, Australia produced a wave of incredible bands that never got the recognition they deserved. Their songs were loud, emotional, and bursting with creativity, the kind of rock that defines a country's true musical soul. These are 10 underrated Australian rock bands that deserve another listen. When I first discovered the Angels, I couldn't believe how tight and ferocious they sounded. Formed in Adelaide in 1974, they embodied everything great about Australian pub rock: raw energy, sharp riffs, and a frontman who looked like he could start a riot with a single stare. Doc Neeson commanded the stage like a preacher of chaos, and the Brewster brothers delivered riffs that could cut glass. Songs like Marseille and Take a Long Line defined their punchy, menacing sound. In the US, they had to change their name to Angel City to avoid confusion, which didn't help their international rise. But in Australia, they were unstoppable. One of the most intense live acts of the era. What I love most is that the Angels proved rock didn't need polish to hit hard. It just needed conviction, volume, and a frontman who meant every word.
Thing I've been wondering lately.
Did you know that the Hoodoo Gurus once opened for the Bangles and the Go-Go's, yet still never broke into the American mainstream? Formed in Sydney in 1981, they were one of the most inventive bands of their era, mixing garage rock grit, surf vibes, and clever pop hooks into a sound all their own. Their debut, Stone Age Romeos, exploded with color and attitude, followed by Mars Needs Guitars, a record packed with witty lyrics and infectious choruses.
It's always bittersweet. I cut and I bleed.
Tracks like What's My Scene and Bittersweet proved they could blend humor, melody, and real emotion in a way few bands could match. In the US, they became college radio darlings, but never chart toppers. What I've always loved about the Gurus is how proudly weird they were. They didn't chase trends or tone down their eccentric style. They doubled down on it. Their music was pure joy wrapped in guitar fuzz, and even today, every song feels alive with that playful Australian spirit.
What's mine? What's mine? What's mine? What's mine? What's my scene?
A schoolboy coming home through fields of cane.
The Go-Betweens were never about stadium anthems, and they were about quiet brilliance. Formed in Brisbane in 1977 by Robert Forster and Grant McLennan, they crafted songs that felt like literature set to shimmering guitars. Cattle and Cane and Streets of Your Town are perfect examples. Poetic, bittersweet, and hauntingly beautiful. They earned endless praise from critics, but commercial success was always out of reach. While other bands chased radio hits, the Go-Betweens created something intimate and enduring. Every album feels personal, almost like opening someone's diary. What I love is how timeless their writing is. No flash, no gimmicks, just emotion and melody. They proved rock doesn't need to shout to make an impact. Decades later, their music still resonates with listeners who crave honesty over hype. For me, the Go-Betweens are the definition of understated genius.
Just waiting for a chance. This fun is watch.
Well, the drums rolled off in my forehead. Guns went off in my chest.
I've always thought the Triffids sounded like the Australian landscape. Vast, emotional, and a little lonely. Coming out of Perth in 1978, they built a sound that felt cinematic. Their 1986 masterpiece, Born Sandy Devotional, remains one of the most atmospheric albums ever made. It's desert poetry turned into rock music. Frontman David McComb wrote with a novelist's touch songs about distance, loss, and beauty and isolation. They gained serious acclaim in Europe, but mass success never followed. Maybe they were too moody for commercial radio, or maybe their vision was just ahead of its time. Listening to the Triffids feels like driving through endless open space at sunset, like haunting, beautiful, and unforgettable. For me, they're proof that Australian rock could be poetic without losing its grit. Every track feels alive with emotion, and McComb's voice still echoes like a ghost from the outback. When I first heard Radio Birdman's Radios appear, it felt like a lightning bolt. Formed in Sydney in 1974, they fused Detroit punk with Australian rebellion. Fast, fierce, and fearless. Their music had the intensity of the Stooges, but with sharper precision and attitude. They didn't wait for the industry to catch up. Birdman built their own venues, pressed their own records, and created a DIY blueprint that inspired generations. Songs like Aloha, Steve, and Dano, and New Race still feel alive with danger. They weren't looking for fame, they were building a movement. What I admire most is their independence. In a world chasing trends, Radio Birdman carved their own path, and punk in Australia was never the same again. To me, they're the spark that lit the fire for everything that came next. When Stranded exploded through my speakers for the first time, I couldn't believe it was recorded in 1976 before most punk even existed. The Saints were that far ahead. Hailing from Brisbane, they were one of the first true punk bands anywhere in the world. Their sound was raw, distorted, and completely fearless. Frontman Chris Bailey's sneer and Ed Cupper's jagged guitar made every track feel like a revolution. Albums like Eternally Yours showed that behind the chaos were real songwriters, melodic, clever, and full of heart. They never reached massive commercial heights, but their influence spread far and wide. I love that they did it their own way, long before punk was fashionable. The Saints were outsiders in every sense, and that's what made them brilliant. They didn't just follow the rules, they broke them before anyone else even wrote them. Sunnyboys always felt like the emotional center of early 80s Australian rock. When I first heard Alone With You, it hit me how honest and melodic they were. No pretension, just heart. Formed in Sydney in 1979, they blended power pop with youthful vulnerability. Every song sounded like summer with a hint of sadness underneath. Their self-titled debut remains one of the great Australian albums, catchy, hopeful, and deeply human. But the band burned bright and fast, undone by exhaustion and personal struggles. That only makes their story more powerful. I love how their music captures both joy and melancholy, sometimes in the same chorus. Sunnyboys showed that rock could be sincere without being soft. Even now, their songs feel alive, full of warmth, energy, and that unmistakable spark of innocence that never fades. Died Pretty always struck me as one of those bands that should have been huge. Formed in Sydney in 1983, they took post-punk moodiness and turned it into something grand and emotional. Their sound sat somewhere between The Doors and Echo and the Bunnymen. Dark, melodic, and cinematic. Their 1991 album Doughboy Hollow is a masterpiece. Lush, atmospheric, and loaded with feeling. Singer Ron Pino's voice could shift from fragile to ferocious in seconds, pulling you right into the song's heart. They built loyal followings in Europe and Japan, but somehow never cracked the global mainstream. For me, Died Pretty represent the soulful, introspective side of Australian rock, the kind that makes you close your eyes and just feel. Their music proves that intensity doesn't always come from volume. Sometimes it comes from emotion perfectly controlled. Birdman were the spark, the Celibate Rifles were the wildfire. Formed in Sydney in 1979, they combined punk ferocity with sharp songwriting and wicked humor. Their sound was fast, fiery, and full of attitude, but beneath the noise were hooks that stuck. Tracks like Thank You America and Wild Desire showed they could be clever and rebellious at once. On stage, they were a force. Sweaty, loud, and completely unfiltered. They earned a cult following in Europe and kept touring relentlessly, refusing to slow down. I've always admired how authentic they were. The Celibate Rifles never tried to please anyone. They just played with conviction. Every note sounded like it meant something. In a world full of copycats, they stayed proudly themselves. And that's true rock and roll. Australian Crawl were massive at home, but strangely invisible abroad, which makes them perfect for this list. Formed in Melbourne in 1978, they captured the sound of coastal Australia like no one else. Songs like Boys Light Up, Errol, and Reckless feel sun-soaked, yet sophisticated, mixing breezy pop melodies with sharp lyrics. They weren't as heavy as pub rock acts or as artsy as new wave, which probably confused international markets. But that uniqueness is what I love most. James Rain's voice had this lazy charisma, perfectly matching their stories of surf, nightlife, and suburban mischief. Australian Crawl made music that felt like summer, bright, relaxed, and unapologetically local. Even decades later, their songs carry that same warmth and swagger. They might not be global icons, but in spirit, they're as Australian as it gets. Australia's rock legacy runs far deeper than its household names. These 10 bands may not have topped charts worldwide, but they shaped the country's sound. Fearless, melodic, and endlessly inventive. From punk to power pop to desert anthems, they each brought something unique. If you love discovering hidden gems, these are 10 Australian rock bands you truly need to hear before you die.
What you